All right, well, welcome to the work session for the Board of Education for Greeley-Evans School District 6. We are going to convene. It's 4:01. Today is February 27th, and we'll start by calling the roll.
Mr. Bentley? Present. Ms. Present. Mrs. Mass?
Present.
Mr. Matthews?
Present.
Mr. Norwood? Mrs. Pappas?
Present.
Ms. Sullivan?
Present.
6 members present.
Thank you, Lindsay. And I shouldn't say Mr. Norwood is excused. He is under the weather tonight. And we'll start next with our calendar review, community updates, engagements. So we have a big week. Just to remind everybody, we have negotiations. I know several of you probably have meetings tomorrow with negotiations or pre-negotiation meetings. Then we have negotiations all Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Please make a note, we will be at Ames, the Ames Welcome Center this time. And so we're thankful to Ames for allowing it, or for hosting us. And then also,
not at Beatty Hall where we were.
At the big.
Yeah, you're in the big Welcome Center where
Yeah.
we went for the teachers recognition event.
yes,
Somewhere in there.
somewhere in that big Welcome Center.
We'll watch
Okay.
for you.
Okay. We also have the District 6 walk, in District 6 and Friends Art Walk. And that's going to be Friday night. That's a great event, guys. If you've not had a chance to go to that, lots of fun things that take place at that Arts Walk. You can see visual art. You can see a lot of bands and choirs singing in different places. So encourage you to get to that. Also, the Evans Chamber Annual Dinner is on Saturday night. We're going to be at Franklin on the 7th and Greeley-West on the 24th. And then we have a well-distinguished citizens dinner on the 25th. Then we're back to our next board meeting, and we'll close out March that way. But that just gives us the month. Is there anything that we're not remembering?
The Success Foundation breakfast
Oh,
on Monday morning
Oh, yeah.
is not
Monday morning.
listed here.
It's not on here, but that
I
would
think it's
be
in our
like the
calendar.
6th, I think.
It is on your calendar, and it's at Greeley-West High School.
Yeah, on the 6th,
And
6:45.
it's early, but another fantastic event. They do such a great job of getting it in and getting everybody out on time. And I do think you'll have the chance to, not that we need to tour Greeley-West again, guys, but they are, for anybody else listening, if you do go to the Success Foundation breakfast, you will have the chance to tour Greeley-West. Any other? All right, very good. We'll move right on to Innovation 2030 update, Climate and Culture Goal 1. Dr. Belch, I'll give it to you.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. Good to have you here tonight. I will also announce that Amy Lemon, Executive Assistant to the Board and to the Superintendent's Office, is also out ill tonight. So Lindsay Richard jumped in this morning and took care of everything to get us ready for tonight. So thank you to Lindsay, and she'll be supporting us during the board meeting. I'm happy to introduce to you, Dr. Stacy Dattery, Assistant Superintendent of Academic Achievement and K-8 and elementary schools. And then with her tonight will be Jessie Tiarina, Director of Cultural Excellence, and our Assistant Principal, Amy Zuloff. Not for much longer, pending your approval tonight, Amy will be our new principal at Greeley Central High School. With that, I'll pass it over to you all, and then I'll pick up when you're ready for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Pilch. We wanted to just start as we kind of think about our work this year and give a little bit of time and space to, before we talk about our cultural proficiency update in terms of the strategic plan tonight, it's been a little while since we've had time to visit with all of you about this work, and to just take a moment, not only to talk about the work that we're doing, but what really is cultural proficiency? What does that mean to us in our district? And what has kind of been the work? Because we've been engaging in this for a while, so we're going to take a little bit of it, make sure that we are all on the same page around in the journey. But Dr. Fitzy being with us newer, and then, to where you've been with us through pretty much this entire journey. So with that, I want to just turn this over to Mr. Tiarina, who's been with us doing this work, and share a little bit about some of this.
Appreciate this time. So happy to be here with you all. One of the things that I think about that's huge when we think about cultures other than our own in a diverse community, I think about the importance of empathy. Some of the work that we're doing in strengthening partnerships for our families are called empathy interviews. So really to have an understanding of the cultures other than your own is so important when you're looking at diverse settings that are very mobile. And this quote really spoke to that thinking. It took me a little while to get to a quote, but I thought this quote was fitting, especially for the activity that we're going to be doing with y'all here in the next few minutes. I think one of the most important things that takes place in doing any type of work when working with communities and building capacity around the understanding of other people from other communities is having accurate definitions of what the work is. You know, oftentimes I think misinterpretation lends to misinterpretation of the work that's being done. You know, so when I think about two words that are heavily impactful in the work that we do here in District 6, that's also included in our Innovation 2030 strategic plan, cultural proficiency is one of them. You know, and Randall Lindsay, who is really the practitioner and the origin of the work, which really originated in medical practice around what is it to have certain bedside manners when working with communities other than your own. So this work has really been rooted in that area for quite a long time. Cultural proficiency is the policies and practices in an organization or the values and behavior of an individual that enable the person or institution to engage effectively with people and groups who are different from them. Culturally responsive practices. You know, I think the responsivity and the practice is essential when you think about the work, because practice is also behavior. You know, there comes a point in time where strategy no longer is impactful on the work that you're attempting to do to really make sure that there's access to high levels of academics, but also academic achievement for student learning. So it goes beyond from strategies into behaviors, which are practices. So the definition that we have here from Ed Week that was really current is using students' customs, characteristics, experience, and perspectives as the tools for better classroom instruction. What I do really enjoy about the work is how it also lends to the Colorado Teacher Standard #2 when you're looking at creative safe spaces for diverse learners.
Thank you, Jesse. I think that's a nice grounding for just like what are those definitions, and I love that it was really rooted in, when you think about this work being rooted in the medical profession and with their bedside manner. I think that's just a good reminder. And certainly the work that we do with our students. And so when did this journey really begin for us? As Dr. Pilch and I were really talking about this and preparing for you all this evening, we really know that this started as we were talking, and when Dr. Pilch came on, and I'm sorry, it's a little blurry, but all blown up on the screen, but really thinking about this work of equality versus equity and what is the difference between that. And many of you have probably seen this kind of picture in this diagram, but it's such a good reminder and so simplistic. But the reality of when we're talking equal, well, everybody, every child can, you know, look, or maybe not every child can look, and you know, as evidenced by this, but really saying, all right, what is it that if the boxes are all the same and the fence is all the same and the room is the same and you know all those things, that's equal. They all have an opportunity, right? But when you really say, well, making it equitable says, all right, what does that look like if this child doesn't really need the box? They're good. This child needs 2 boxes and this other child actually needs a ramp. The box isn't even enough because they can't get up on there. And so while it is simple and, you know, and not to oversimplify some pretty complex work, it really does remind us of that being equitable is not the same as being equal for every child and every learner and every, you know, when you think in the medical field, for every patient. Not every patient needs the same thing from their doctor and needs them to approach them in the same way. But you do have to think about what does that person need from you, and then how do you respond, and what do they need in order to be able to have a good education or good medical attention. And so that's, you know, again, maybe a little too simplified, but really not if we just break it down. And to say in our district, when Dr. Pilch came in 2014, 15, 16 to us, she's going to share a little bit about how we came to this work in that, and then in 2016, 17, how we really started.
So Stacey, I think go back to the previous slide if
Okay,
you would.
sure.
Because I think it's just a really good visual.
Yeah.
So one of the first things that I was a part of when I got to District 6 was, and at the time it was called English Language Development audit. The Colorado Department of Education had come in at the district's request,
At
or
our request,
at the district's
yes.
request. They had been in the district the previous spring, and so this is spring of 2015. I was hired in 15. to serve the 15-16 school year. And so that previous spring, the Department of Education had sent in a team of folks, some from other districts, some from the department, some experts in the state around English language development. And they had come in to assess and observe our English language development programs and our instruction and our practices, and then to give us advice and wisdom and insight on how we might proceed with improving our student achievement in English language development. Now I want, just to remind you, at that time I believe we had 11 of our schools on either priority improvement or turnaround here in the district. And those weren't just our schools with our highest English language development populations. They were across the system, where we had some significant gaps and some significant lack of achievement in District 6. And so we met with those folks that came in to do the audit and the assessment and give us advice. And they said, yes, you have an issue. Your students are not achieving. Yes, they're struggling. Your teachers are struggling. And we don't really know how to fix that without more resources. You're going to need a lot of resources to be able to fix this, because you really need more teachers. You need to get lower class size, and you need to do a lot of teacher training. And so there wasn't much good news to come out of their audit at that time. Resources were very scarce in District 6. It wasn't as if we could go and add 13 specialists in cultural linguistic development for our children. And so we began to look a little deeper. And what we saw was what I did my first year is I began to look at what is the work that we need to get done in District 6. And then I looked at, with help of a coach who coaches me, I looked at, okay, so what's the work we got to get done? And then what are the positions we need to do that work? So I didn't take a look at, okay, who do we currently have on staff yet, and say, okay, let's have them do this, and Stacy can do this, and Annette can do this. Instead, we pretended like we didn't have anybody, and this is the work, and these are the buckets of work, and so then these are the positions. As a result of that work, in my first 6 months or so here, probably 4 months really, 3 or 4. In that time, as a result of that, over that year, we ended up eliminating 17 positions out of this building. We did not have a director of cultural excellence or cultural proficiency or equity. Back then, I think a lot of times Jesse's position was called a director of equity. That's what it was called in a lot of larger districts. We did not have that actual position. We also did not have a director of English language development, or as we call it today, cultural linguistic development in the district. So we posted one position, a director of cultural excellence and cultural linguistic diversity or development. I think it was actually ELD at the time. We posted one position, and as we got into the hiring process, what I realized by interviewing the candidates and the work that we were going to be asking the candidates to do, and the significant system change that we needed here, was that we needed 2 positions. And so we made the decision to actually go with 2 director positions, hired Jesse in the Director of Cultural Excellence and Family Engagement position, hired Brian Lamos in the position of Director of Cultural and Linguistic Development, I think it was called something else at the time, and Director of Instruction. So with that, and the reason for doing that was when I would ask the question, who's responsible for the cultural proficiency work here in the system? And folks would say, everybody. Well, if everybody's responsible, nobody's really responsible, right? And any big work that you want to do in a system, you've got to have somebody who's the chief worrier of that. We have a director of assessment. Her job is to worry about assessment and worry about our assessment data and manage that. We have a director of curriculum. His job is to worry about curriculum. We have a director of special education. His job is to be the chief person to worry about special ed, and director of nutrition services, and you get the picture, folks. A director in human resources. But we didn't have a director who ran with cultural excellence and cultural proficiency work. And yet, what we knew, with some of the information from CDE and with the experience that we have, is that we needed to do significant cultural proficiency work in this system if we were going to move student achievement. We had to know the students we were serving, we had to know their culture and how they were coming into our system, and we had to do that work to begin to move student achievement. I really believe this work is the foundational work that must occur before you can actually even change instructional practice. it's the foundation for that work, and I see Amy Zuloff nodding her head. So with that, that's kind of how we got to where we are today. We began the work slowly, I'd say, and yet very intentionally. Do you have this on here next?
I do,
Okay.
actually, but we can talk
Okay.
a little bit more.
Yeah, so you can see what the timeline. We began the work first with our district leadership team. So all of our building and district leaders, all those directors I just mentioned, our managers, and our building principals and assistant principals. So we began that work with them. And then we began to create school equity teams. And you can see how the work just continues to roll out. With that, I think I'm supposed to pass it back to the team to let them share.
Oh, that's good.
They are the boots on the ground in this work. And it's a work in progress. And I'll just close with this before we move on with the rest of the team, is that we just felt like we haven't had this conversation with you all for a long time. We haven't had a lot of conversations. Most what we dealt with for a long time was a pandemic. And most of our work was around the pandemic. But we're bringing you in the work session tonight an update on this area in the strategic plan. But we wanted to have some conversation with you all tonight to really help you to know what we mean when we're talking about cultural excellence or cultural proficiency, and what that means for our system. And we have plenty of time built in to make sure you all have time to ask the questions that you have as well.
So to kind of round out a little bit more about what Dr. Pilch is sharing, the work really started with our upper leadership. So it wasn't about doing any kind of real staff training until really our leadership had a better sense and understanding of what does it mean to be culturally responsive to our students in a way that's going to be meaningful and really move student learning and achievement at the end of the day. Understand where they're at. So you can see kind of timeline. Well, there's a lot of things that went inside of that. That's the crux of it, and that took us a good many years. In the last few years, and then to your point, the pandemic happened, and that's really, we didn't have as much emphasis in that area, right? But you can then see, as we've kind of picked up since then, in the last few years, I want to say the one thing that's probably, as Jesse and I were really reflecting and thinking about what we're very proud of, is that this work isn't in isolation, that it is wholly rooted and purposed in the student learning and achievement, and then this really intentional alignment with the strengthening partnerships goal of our strategic plan, that whole focus area to partner with our boots on the ground in the class, with our teachers, partner with our students, and partner with our families in really meaningful ways through what you really see in training our staff in empathy interviews, home visits, and really understanding students of high mobility. That equity work is not just about one facet of culture, and I think that's really what you're going to learn here as Jesse and Amy walk us through a really fun activity, that culture is so much of who we are and of who our students are, and really thinking about how we're really deeply understanding that as a staff is very important, and I think we're starting to really see some incredible benefit from that. So I just want to say that thankfully Jesse leads that whole strengthening partnerships, right? Like that's just, it's interwoven in the work that we do. So we'll have a whole update on strengthening partnerships as well coming up very soon, and as we continue. But really we wanted to spend some time, and I'm going to hand this to you, Jesse, really talking about this activity that we do with all of our staff and have done, and this idea around creating a space for culture, and what does that really mean. So thank you, Amy and Jesse.
Definitely. So thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Dr. Pilch. And you all hit it right, around what it really truly is. Culture is really about having an understanding of who you are as a person. Mm-hmm. And if you have that understanding, it leads to having a better understanding of who others are as people as well. Because in that, as an educator in positions of power, we need to have an understanding of the impact we have on others and how we show up. And this is an activity that we do every year annually with our new professional academy. So we have around 250 folks at the beginning of each year engage in this workshop, and we've done it with DLT, we've done it with principals. I recently did that at Early College Academy, so it's made the rounds, but it's a really super fun activity that we're going to engage the 6 of you in. So if you wanted to pass these along.
So you need a writing utensil.
So essentially, culture is defined by exclusive and shared beliefs, values, customs, artifacts, and behaviors with which we as individuals and community define ourselves, one another, and the human experience. When I think about culture, I often think about the mutual understanding of human experience. Reciprocity is a key, essential element when it comes to this work. So this is me, and so my name, Jesus, is on my birth certificate, and it's on my license. Jesse does not exist on my birth certificate or license. However, I've been called Jesse and used Jesse for the last 38 years. I'm going to be 50. And so I've been wrestling with what it looks like to reclaim my name. And it was all based on a conversation I had with another facilitator around, where did my name come from? And my name came from my father, and his name came from his father. So I'm Jesus Tijerino III. And I'm like, my grandpa was Jesse Tijerino III. And the facilitator goes, he wasn't. He more than likely didn't call himself Jesse. He more than likely called himself Jesus or Chuy. So I really thought about what it was for me to, at almost 50 years old, wrestle with my name and the importance of identity. And if a child has some confidence and security in the identity of how they show up in a school, it's one less obstacle they have to address when attempting to learn. Because there are some situations where children are going in and they're receiving education, but they're also having a schooling experience. And if they're wrestling with the schooling experience, it really becomes more difficult to learn. So always think about, one, how close to their original self are they and how do they get there, right? So this is who I am essentially. So I'm going to have you all, as I'm going through this process, think about 5 elements you all are made of. That if one of those elements was absent tomorrow morning, you would be less Terry Pappas. You would be less Michael Matthews. These are the 5 that make me who I am right now. And as years have gone by, they've changed over time. But I'm a reader. I'm a huge reader. So if I were to wake up tomorrow morning and not have the ability to have a book in my hand, audio's pretty cool. However, I need a book. And oftentimes I need a hardback. So I'm a reader. And it's been a lot to me, and one, having an understanding of who I am and where I come from when I think about history, but also just seeing myself in books. And I know that it's had an impact on how others see me. It really is nice to know some stuff. I'm also an educator. And I also understand that these cultural elements are interchangeable. Like right now, since winter break, I've been all educator. And sometimes one element, you dedicate so much time to that one element that the other elements seem to not get as much love as they need to, right? So when I'm an educator, my familia seems to get less love. I'm not as good as a father. I'm more absent. But there's an understanding there, right? But during winter break, I was all dad, all husband, all son. But as soon as that Monday came around, it's been bap, 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 bap. But I know that. I understand that they're interchangeable. I'm also a skateboarder. I've been a skateboarder since 10, 11 years old. It's been my therapy. It's been a huge part of my life. It's brought a lot of heartache, a lot of broken bones, a lot of pain, but it's also brought a lot of joy, and I'm gonna make it to 50 skateboarding. So that's really cool, right? And I'll talk a little bit about what else it's done for me when it comes to the work. Another thing I am that's significant is I'm a brown male, and I think about how much that has meant to me over time, my ancestors, the culture, the food, tortillas, abuelitas, a lot of the things that have come to me because of who I am and where I come from. So these are 5 significant things that if any one of them was absent tomorrow morning, I'd be less Jesus. So we kind of want to begin to unpack what that looks like, right? I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Amy and have her share hers.
You ready?
Ready.
Okay. So we like to model this before we have other people do it because it takes some vulnerability to really think and reflect and then have a conversation about it. And so we appreciate that you're willing to listen to us as we go through this too. I've gotten to do this activity with Jesse on numerous occasions, and it does change and shift depending on the time of the year and what we've got going on in our lives. But it also then brings up a very cool conversation between the two of us as we're talking through how are we going to present? What did you put in your circles this time? And that helps us understand each other better as we're having this conversation too. So the first thing that I put in on mine is faith. And so being a public school educator and then bringing the faith element into it has complications, right? If that is a huge part of my life, but also acknowledging that separation between church and state, that's something that I work to navigate in my everyday life. I've got church group tomorrow night, working with my pastor on, as I was doing interview questions and being strong and courageous, and so that's just a big part of who I am. I went back and forth about what I put in this bubble. I go back and forth every time between leader and educator. I chose to go with educator this round too, because when I really think about leader, it can mean a lot of different things in a lot of different areas, but I truly believe that the education is where I belong in. And so I do feel like I could be a leader in a lot of different areas, but education has my heart, specifically public education, and so that's why I put educator in that bubble. My next one is athlete. I love to exercise. I love to be active. And if I couldn't do that, I feel like I would be a different person. I get up super early in the morning to exercise because I feel like that makes me nicer to people throughout the day because I've got the endorphins. And my husband actually was teasing me as I was getting ready because my jackets don't quite fit. I have to get stretchy jackets because I've got these like very broad shoulders, but I've lived into that athleticism, and it's part of who I am. I'm also a mom. I have 3 young children. I have 2 10-year-olds and an 8-year-old. Right now, my mom is taking my youngest to basketball. My husband is picking up my son, one of the 10-year-olds at reading group, and then my dad will be bringing my other daughter to basketball tonight too. And so as Jesse talked about, like balancing the educator and the mother part, that's something that we're working through as a family. And I told my husband, this is the only night I'm working tonight. I promise I'll be home the rest of the evening. But making sure that I'm doing a good job of keeping those pieces in balance. My older sister is in town, who is an incredible leader. She's in the United States Air Force, and she got to hang out with my family and I over the weekend, which was fantastic. She was very excited to get makeovers from my daughters, but then she was also very excited to send my daughters off with me, as she doesn't have any kids. That's a choice that she made, but that's a huge part of my life. And then I also acknowledge that I am a white female educator in a school system that has primarily black and brown students. And so I acknowledge that adds a layer to who I am and how I operate within the school.
So now we're going to take some time and give you all a few minutes, if you have not done so already, to have identified 5, right? And only 5. Some folks like to do like one and then a slash and another one.
And try to keep it as one word too.
Right.
That's an extra challenge.
No, you didn't. We only get 5.
And we usually do this activity where we get to walk around and like creep on people and see what they're writing. And so we don't get to do that tonight, but I'm trusting that you're paying attention to your phone
walk around
rules.
if you want, Amy.
Really? Jesse told me to sit here and stay here, so I'm going to follow the rules. We want them to like just talk about what they shared first before we get to the questions. What did they put on their thing and why? Okay. Okay, it looks like we're close close to done-ish, but we also recognize that this is not the easiest thing to do. And so what we would like you to do is, you've got some elbow shoulder partners kind of paired up already naturally with the 2 and the 2 and the 2. And we'd love for you to be able to take about 2 minutes and share with each other what you put on your cards and why.
Go ahead, Mr. Matthews.
But outdoorsman, just music lover.
I'm a pastor.
Not even, no, not even
Every day.
but
Music lover, did you hyphenate it? You put
I go from like techno to country to hard rock.
It's hyphenated on your thing.
I only played one sport,
Southern
but
It's very important.
I like
And I,
you know, father.
I also feel like take care of him, not take care of him, but you know, keep that relationship.
Hey, for me, it's just like such a part of my life.
I'm a nerd.
It's such a
I
big
like
part
when
of
you
my
put
life.
it like,
Historian.
if this was missing,
that I'm a child
would you
of
feel
immigrants,
less
and
yourself?
so
So I thought
I feel like even if I meet like a Korean kid,
definitely I
or a kid from Korea, like I'm like, oh, you didn't grow up in Korea.
value, I feel passion, and I feel
No English
things
at all.
like that about being a
I
nurse.
love that I'm bilingual.
I was trying to
and
kind of encompass my work on the board, but also my
Thank you for sharing.
90% of the
So I really struggle a little bit with it, but I
feel
put family just because I am the matriarch of the family. You know, that connects
sometimes myself
I consider myself an educator and probably always will.
just being an advocate.
Nature is really important to me.
No, I put advocate, but it's like sometimes my son would be like,
every day.
I don't need you to advocate with swim manager, mom.
I just get out there and I would be
so
different.
it's
I
a tiny
also
country,
put
but we're very proud and love Babuza.
And then these two are similar, but
And then
community is
with
very
Warrior,
important to me.
I feel like I'm
Specifically the
advocate, not
community
necessarily
that I
class, but like in clinic.
have worked with over the past decade.
I like to run,
And
it's
how
very important to me.
I just
And
have a
I think I would, if that community wasn't part of me,
I think so too. I think we're good
a
enough.
significant part. And then just service.
Greeley community.
The
I'm also American,
the North Greeley
which
community.
definitely like
specifically.
I eat pizza.
Well, and just the whole area, Madison, Martinez, that whole north area. Yeah. And then service, just, it's important to me, you know.
Yeah, and that's where there's my question.
Service to the community, selfless service to the
Now they're
community,
becoming
through SAVA, through volunteering, through doing those things that
That guy that
as well.
I think
ran
are
my camp,
important. You know, right?
he immigrated when he was like
That
6
make me who I am.
from Armenia.
They always
During
make
like
sense,
the
right?
fall
Your
of the Soviet
nicknames.
Union. So his father was communist,
but I did put
so communist party USSR, and like they made him, so they went to Italy on vacation, and then they ended up getting.
It is interesting when you think about it because you think about culture as being,
whatever it's called,
I'm
and so like just to hear that
white
point of view,
woman.
like, 'cause you always
That's
hear
really
the-
not who makes me who I am.
Side of it, right?
Well, I mean,
And it's just to hear like,
It could be, yeah.
he's a
Yeah.
millionaire. I don't.
Okay,
he's a
team, we're
billionaire,
gonna ask you to pause really quick.
but it was in so many,
But yeah, we have to-
and then so many
Yeah.
likenesses of problems and issues and how his what he
does.
finally won the-
It's so hard to pause these conversations
It really is a big deal.
as we're watching you engage with each other, because we see you smiling, we see you connecting with each other, and that's the intention of this activity, right? As you're sharing pieces of yourselves, you're creating and building some connections, and I just love seeing people smile as they work through this activity. We have some very intentional questions that we're going to have you work through as pairs, and then have the opportunity to share out as you're thinking about what does this look like as we're navigating this conversation.
With which cultural element do you currently identify most strongly? I gave you that example at the beginning around right now, I identify most strongly as an educator. I'm going to sleep thinking about education, I wake up thinking about education. And then I think about my son and my daughter. But no, educator. So if you'd like to share with your partner, we're going to take around about 2-3 minutes. You can all give each other about a minute, minute and a half. To choose one of the 5 elements that you have put on your card as the one that you identify with most strongly right now. Go for it.
I'd have to pick father. I mean, like
Yeah,
entrepreneur.
it's
Even when I'm going to work, it's if I thought by myself, I could live off a lot less, and I would be happy just having an easy life.
Thinking about them, what they need, and
It's hard.
just I don't gotta always be through it right now.
I feel like didn't get to see.
Well, there's a lot going on with my kids that you have to.
I feel like my dual bicultural is what I'm grappling with the most.
I think for me, at this moment in time, service, just because
to kind of
and I include the school board in this. It's very time intensive right now.
And how do I get 4 on 5
Take a lot of energy. But also, Seva, because we're doing
this is
so,
actually really
I think this is a
big
busy time
right
of
now.
year.
It's called
As we
Begin Our
get
Week.
bring
It's
him.
about a bunch of people grappling with identity
We're starting
issues.
to do service at one
It's like, who are we, but it's
trying to figure out what
English.
that looks like.
It's a bunch of people. It's actually based out of
Because our
Colorado, which
community
is
is Seva community
the East and West Coast are more known for Latinx communities.
It requires more
It's out of Colorado Public Radio.
intentionality about
A
what
bunch
we
of
do
young
and
men.
how we do it.
Rough
How we
like me,
can
who,
use
like, whose parents don't totally understand them. We're trying to figure out who we are.
Staying on top of things for them, but also be independent to a degree.
Thank you. Awesome. Would each group like a little share out? You all can just share a little bit about the one that you've identified with most strongly. That'd be great. Who'd like to start?
I shared that right now, in this stage of my life, my biculturalism is something that's a part of me that I've been trying to understand better, what it means to be Latina and American, and how I have 2 different cultures that I literally grew up with. Like when I was little, I went to a Spanish-speaking church and an English-speaking church at the same time. And so just understanding who I am as having grown up in an immigrant household, but liking to read Goosebumps novels and things. And so I think it's a fun part to be understanding. But that's where I am right now.
Thank you.
Me too. I put father. Basically, all my other stuff kind of revolves around father. I put outdoorsman. I go outdoors to be with my boys. I put athlete. I do that to kind of inspire my boys to live a healthier life. I go to work as an entrepreneur to give my boys a better life. So most of my stuff funnels back towards father. So it was pretty easy.
Thank you.
I had father also. Just it's the thing in my life that seems the most non-negotiable at the moment. That everything else can be pushed into this or that, and that just is time intensive and also probably the thing I'm most proud of, and the thing I like you say go to bed thinking about and wake up thinking about.
I put service, and in service I include school board service right now as I end my tenure on the board. There's just so many things that are going on, and all the things that are happening with us as school board members and as the district as a whole. But I also am thinking about the organization I'm involved in with Seva Community, and as we evolve as a organization, we're continuing to figure out how we can have the most impact on families, and just managing all of that is important, and it's also somewhat challenging. So, yeah.
I put family, and that includes being a mom and a wife. And I have 2 teenagers that just want to be at everything they're in. I'm experiencing the tiny griefs along the way of, they don't need me to do that anymore. My son even said, this is Cecily's second to last time doing this thing. And I was like, stop saying that. Being present, helping them to begin to start being more independent, and then also, continuing to maintain my marriage, because the kids won't be here in 3 more years, and we still like each other. And we want to, kind of it's part 2 when the kids are a little more independent.
I went with mom. I think I just connected with it the most just over this last weekend. I was able to get 4 of my 5 kids home, and we have an annual family gathering, and it's ex-wives, ex-husbands, it's everybody, but it's all about the kids. And the focal point is just having the kids in the middle and the grandkids, and just living in the moment and having the tears and the laughter and celebrating, their momentous times, what they're going through, and hearing their struggles and trying to help guide them.
Thank you. And you really spoke to the whole fact when you talk about the dynamics, and there's adults. And you can have adults with different perspectives, multiple cultural perspectives. But at the end of the day, it's all about the kids. And I think it really speaks to the work that we're doing here also when you think about the multiple perspectives that we have with adults and educators and roles. But at the end of the day, collectively, we do what's best. The kids will benefit the most.
Okay, here's your next question. With which cultural element do others identify you the most strongly? When they see you, what do they see first? And so this one is difficult for me. I do think like the one where I am the most out and visible for people is when I'm an educator, and so that's what I'm known as in the community. I mean, I wish I was known as an athlete in the community, but I'm not like that kind of athlete. But I do think that people see educator first, and that actually hurts a little bit because they don't see mother first, right? And so they see the educator first, but being aware of that is interesting. So now that's the question that you and your partner get to talk about.
Depends on who we're talking about, right? Like, my nursing friends know I'm a nurse, and my
Father on to me, probably.
church friends probably know I'm a mother, or I don't know.
Your signs were everywhere.
Were they?
Thinking about you.
Others identifying themselves.
And that's what I would guess is your
I forget
business.
sometimes, but most people probably don't.
Yeah, for me,
People forget that.
I don't know, actually.
Yeah, I would agree, that's probably.
I'm curious that you said position.
I don't really know.
I
I
feel like-
suppose maybe,
Like if you didn't know me,
Yeah, I mean, I would say
No use.
to people that I
maybe
don't
service
know
to the
very well.
community.
Just like
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
community, it
I don't
probably is,
really,
yeah, like
the other three, I don't
or-
think really people see me as that necessarily.
Maybe. But like
mean,
at my church, I was the
At
baby
one
nurse for
point,
like
probably, I don't
I'm
know
in this
now.
project right now.
That's a hard one, I don't know. Honestly.
I had to do this painting last night that represented another female in the community.
Yeah, that's
And
what
one
I'm
person,
saying.
we interviewed like 47 females in Greeley interviewed each other who are into art, and then
Well, and,
inspired through the muse, and you were the muse.
and that's also, I mean, that's what
did a
it is, how the
painting based
community
on
is well
story of his
educated.
life. Which is
I mean, that's what it is educating, so
Like she actually
maybe
wrote that
educator.
one Freebird Fund Day.
Yeah. So I mean,
That's a
I
rough
feel
one.
like it's very
I was like, you're easy, but I'm hard, I'm boring.
And I don't know if that, I
She's
think
like,
that
she's
is
in New
like,
York, Miami,
before you
baby's
to have like the
wife.
first question
Yeah,
to ask
the
them.
dancer. Anyway,
But I don't know if that's.
when I went to tell my story to the girl who was going to do my artwork, I told her my whole story.
I'm curious about that.
You've heard my whole story, it took like an hour.
I don't think necessarily, I mean, this is an interesting activity, just because you really have to think about.
Kids.
Okay, for the sake of time, because we do want to make sure we work through all of it, because they all are important. We're not going to have everybody share out on this one, but we would love to hear at least one reflection if you would like to go, if you would like to share out.
I picked the educator because I was in education for 10 years, and I still have parents and kids that reach out to me for tutoring and whatnot. But then there's also the connection to the board, so it's kind of a double duty on that aspect. But one thing I do want to say is Natalie had pointed out that it's hard to pick because it depends on who your audience is as to how you're viewed. And so we were actually just kind of walking through around the board here and, you know, identifying each person based off of their career is how it ended up coming out. So, yeah.
Which I'm curious if that is the way it is in other cultures or other countries, because my brother-in-law lives in London, and he said it's not as typical for somebody to walk up and be like, "Hi, I'm so-and-so, what do you do?" There's some other questions sometimes. They don't go straight to like, "What's your job?" But I do feel like in my growing up or my experience in America, we always ask that first question.
Like, what do you do?
What's your profession?
And that's the importance of asking the question, right? You
Yeah.
know, when I work with teachers and I hear things like, why is this taking place in my classroom? You know, I respond by the better question is what is this teaching me about the culture in my classroom? You know, and how those questions lead to understanding.
Okay, so for our next one, we're going to combine 2 questions together so that you and your partner can talk about these in conjunction. So describe a time when a cultural element worked for your advantage and against your advantage. And they even could be the same cultural element, depending on the situation.
Like for me, skateboarding always worked for my advantage. Kids loved that I skateboarded. It was such a great relationship builder. And you got to make little deals, right? You get a board if you do well, right? So that always worked.
Was it a disadvantage when you came in with broken limbs?
Yes.
Okay.
So it worked against my advantage as well.
Okay. So we would love for you to launch into that conversation now.
I feel like this one's really easy for me because I'm very well respected because I'm a nurse. So very much hated.
So this is a bit of an intellectual conversation that I talked to Anthony Asmus a lot about the immigrant.
Kind of. I mean, I would
So
say I'll just
it's
go back to
like-
service because I think
like
that
throughout COVID.
Well,
it is an
lots of times
advantage to
with parents
have
who
the access to resources and
um,
have the ability
coming
to
from another
provide
country.
service.
They're
and
coming
in a
from another
situation
country to
where
give you a better life.
you're elected to
There's
here.
hope
I mean,
in
that's
the
an advantage. It's
And so
also a
although you're
disadvantage.
poor,
Well, I mean,
there's
because,
also
like
before
psychology in your
COVID, I mean, like
service
especially in
takes
Burma,
time.
like
and so studies have
so
shown when
energy.
you compare
So it does take away from some of the other,
which is very
to a child
unpopular.
whose
maybe
parents
I
are
don't
the
know
same,
what
they're the same
What if
poor
it's
so,
nation.
what if
I would
that
say
was
This one has been
but, like, we get- so I think there is-
generationally poor in this country.
Even prior
The
to
immigrant
COVID,
child
there
always
was
does
some
better.
holistic versus
Hope factor.
Yeah, it's like this
model
hope
type
factor.
of-
So I feel like being a child of
Probably
immigrants,
moving
obviously
to
there's
my
all these
If we ever
obstacles. I
got
had to figure out how to do the FAFSA by myself.
trying to
and,
have
like,
a home birth,
you know, everything.
What do you think about
any
it?
medical care.
And my parents, you know, couldn't talk well to my teachers and all that.
And I would always be like,
But like they gave us the hope factor.
but yeah, so, but yeah, the pandemic really made
I
those
don't know,
changes.
like, none of them really work against me, I don't think. Like, I don't know.
So you want to skip
I mean,
to
your
that?
shoulders
Yeah,
are
I mean, like,
Tend to give you the benefit.
it causes some pain, but it's not against my advantage, I guess, you know, like, there's too much disadvantage. I don't know, like, the entrepreneur
to
part,
do that
like, it's
one?
a huge advantage, because I'm
Yeah,
pretty
that's
flexible,
probably
but then
really
also
true.
there's times where I'm,
There are some
I cannot make
serious
flexible
misconceptions about
certain
Southerners,
things, or
especially.
it caused me to move from
This area.
Utah, or
Right, right.
once in a while, I can't, you know, I'm still, like, I'm pretty flexible, but I'm, like, if someone says jump, I have to say how.
Okay, we're going to pull you back from this conversation. We're thankful that we had a group share here. Is there another team, or if Taylor would like to share again, she's welcome to do that too. Would anybody like to share on this conversation?
I'll share for us. So Kyle was saying for him, being an entrepreneur can be a double-edged sword in that it's great to have a really flexible schedule when it's flexible, but sometimes it's not flexible. And he says that if somebody says jump, he has to say how high, and there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that part of his culture. And for myself, I was sharing with him that being a child of immigrants obviously came with a lot of obstacles. You know, I often share that my family lived in a one-bedroom house till I was in second grade, and I was the third child, so I had 2 older siblings who lived in a one-bedroom apartment much longer than me. And that was, you know, it was hard. You're cramped for space. But the advantage was my parents brought us here for a reason. I get emotional every time. So they left a war-torn country to give us a better life here. And so there was always a hope element. And yeah, and like making my parents' kind of dreams come true. So that was the advantage.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing. Again, I noticed as you first started into this part of the conversation, it took a minute because there's some processing that goes along with this, because you really are thinking about yourselves and who you are, and I appreciate the time that you're taking to think through it. We're going to skip the next question for the sake of time, but we're going to connect these next two. So we're at yellow and pinkish. With which cultural element do you find is a source of insecurity, and with which cultural element do you find is a source of strength? And I know this one can be a a little bit difficult too and need some processing. So one of the things that I identify within my cultural element, and I talked about this a little bit at the beginning too, as a source of insecurity, is being a public school educator, but being very strong in my faith and really working like I want to be who I am, but I also acknowledge there's some very clear boundaries. And so within myself, navigating that can be sometimes difficult and is something I have to be very cognizant of. But I also identify it as a strength. While all of my elements I feel like can be a strength, but I also feel like my faith is also a great strength of mine as well. And so we would love for you to be able to process this with your partners.
I guess if I would have put single father, that could have been my insecurity factor, right? But I didn't put single father. I don't find any of those really make me insecure. Once in a while I get a little embarrassed about some of the music I listen to. But
Yeah, for me, I would
got 7 minutes.
like almost hate to admit that of the 5 that I wrote, probably being a physician makes me feel strong. Like,
but
I
also
did it, I accomplished this, look at me.
Don't want to mess up the
And as far as insecurity, probably, especially growing up, being Latina.
real clear,
Like in school, it was actually funny. I grew up in a town really similar to Greeley, but there was the Latinos who were born here, and there was the Latinos who recently immigrated who didn't speak English yet.
right?
And I remember growing up and not wanting to be associated with recent immigrants. Yeah, and feeling like I'm American. Like I'm
Continue to focus on the
better
truth.
for that. So understanding that was wrong, but understanding also that was a part of me at one point being embarrassed who I was.
I don't really know, I guess.
Who I am.
It's getting quiet. I would say community, probably just because I've been here so long and so I had different roles in the community. Sometimes it's a secure role and sometimes it's an insecure role.
Well, I think, I don't know if I defined it a
Sometimes
little bit different. I think my
pretty sure I'm
family
screwing my
gives me
kids up.
strength.
That is a hard one.
So instead of it being like the thing
Okay,
I'm
we
the
would love
strongest
to be able to bring you back for a share out. Is there any group who would like to talk?
I guess that's us. We're the one that hasn't shared out yet. I think for me, both of those, which one gives me the greatest source of insecurity and also the greatest source of strength is being father. And I think that's probably why I would list it as the one that I identify with most, because it sort of taps into your greatest fears, right? And, the one that the role that you're not sure always if you're doing it right, or doing the best thing or what the right decision is, and then also, but it gives you so much direction and purpose, and I find a lot of strength from direction and purpose, and knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it, and so yeah, that would be the one for me.
Thank you for sharing. I think there's a similar reflection on this side too. And so what has been fun about this activity is being able to listen and learn about all of you and building that empathy and understanding of who you are as people. And we've had the awesome experience of being able to do that with a lot of different people throughout the district. And it really does emphasize how unique and wonderful each of our students and staff members are as we're building an understanding of who they are and how they contribute positively to our organization.
So thank you. Of course, thank you. So we're going to do unpack it a little bit more before we go to the last slide with Stacy. So if you can take a few minutes, not a few minutes, just trade your card with your partner. You'll get it back. And it's such a huge importance of knowing. The more you know and the more understanding you have, I think the better informed decision making you'll have if you're in a leadership role or if you're an educator in the classroom. That being said, what I'm going to ask of each of you with any process of your own, I want you to look at your partner's card. And I want you to cross one of the 5 elements out. Just one of them. In any process.
pass. I don't
Yeah.
That's like the
Cross it out
giving them
for
a name.
what purpose?
We'll get to it.
Oh, just
Yeah,
choose
just
one.
choose
This is
one.
random.
Choose
Okay.
Random.
Okay.
Am I writing it down?
Just random. Get pink too.
And as soon as you cross it out, you can hand it back, right? So the idea of this is also, as I mentioned, there's an importance of knowing. Because even in your day-to-day work in the educational system, there's going to be times where you have to make fast decisions, where you cannot really create a safe space for everybody, but the more you know of the cultures within your classroom, the more likely you are to create those spaces of safety, right? But that being said, without knowing sometimes, and maybe even sometimes with knowing, we do take cultural aspects or elements away from the people that are our colleagues, our friends, and our students. So what I'd like to see or hear a little bit more about are what was crossed off from yours.
Physician.
Physician, how does that make you feel?
A little less secure. More insecure.
So, of the five, why physician?
I just kind of thought about, as I interviewed her for the board, wasn't drawn to her as a physician. I don't think we need a physician on the school board. I think that obviously shows that she's intelligent and really bright and hardworking, but the rest of the stuff she brought to the board was more of the reasons kind of I was drawn to her. The physician part complemented who she was.
Thank you. What did she take?
She took entrepreneur off.
How does that make you feel?
I guess I'm doing okay as a father, it says, right? It's all right. I don't see that being forever for me. That's a means to an end. So I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I don't want to do it forever. So.
Sorry.
I was crossed off expat. So I'm a former expat. Lived abroad and shapes a little bit who I am, right? Seeing a culture from another culture. And yes, I'm glad that was the one that was crossed off.
Well, you're welcome.
How did you make that choice, Terry?
I admire and think it's great that Michael taught somewhere else, but it's not important to me on a daily basis. I mean, yeah, as many as the other things are.
What did he take away from you?
He took nature away from me.
Yeah, that's me.
No, that's fine. I mean, nature is important to me, and I have to get outside every day and do walking or do something every day outside. But I don't feel one way or the other that he crossed that out.
Why nature?
Sort of the same reason. I think Terry and I know each other pretty well at this point. We spend a lot of time together, and I just know the other ones are so much. As important as that is, the other ones are so very important to who she is, and so not knowing why we were crossing it off exactly, I did not want to cross out anything that was critical of who she was.
Well, I think about we don't know what we don't know, and if we don't know that. Without intent, sometimes the impact is crossing it off without knowing, right? And when you think about what makes a child glow, a face is not a face unless you shine a light on it. So if you don't know, you can't shine a light on it, right? So, thank you.
Mine was reader that was crossed off.
How does that make you feel?
I think that it would be hard because I so much value knowledge and understanding the world around me. So if I couldn't read, it doesn't necessarily say there aren't other ways, audiobooks. I don't know how specific or general that is, but I also think of my others, that one would be if I had to choose, that's probably the one I would let go also. So.
I didn't want to hurt her feelings because everything else on there was what she spoke so highly of, and that encompasses who she is because all of the other 4 traits pull together her mom component. And being a reader is a one-on-one individual thing you can do, but the others, they all go together. So that was the one that didn't want to hurt your feelings. It was the least.
What did she take away?
Mathematician.
Wait, I'll tell you why. Oh, well, I was trying to see if I could sort of like combine two. And so then like it would like, because she said she was, educator was very important. Mathematician is because she taught math and she continues to help people with math. So I was like, well, that is like inside of an educator. That's what I was thinking. But.
I went to school late in life, and I was one of those, returners that failed the first time and went back in my mid-40s. And so I went to school full-time, raised kids full-time, was volunteering in the schools and whatnot. So my math degree is like a huge success in my life. Even though I'm not doing it right now, it's something I do want to return to. So, yeah.
And would you say math is how you found your calling?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Numbers are my thing.
Awesome, thank you. Well, I appreciate this. So this is what we'll do with teachers or with principals or with NPA. Of course, we get a little bit deeper, but we go through that process again. Sometimes we take away things without knowing, just simply without asking the question. So thank you all.
Oops, you clicked it at the same time I did. Whoops, you stopped
did again.
clicking. So I want to just say thank you for sharing a little piece of what it means and what the work that we've been engaging in with our staff in truly revealing ourselves to each other and to ourselves, as I was just kind of listening a little bit and then listening to you share, that not only do we reveal it to each other, but in going through this, it's like we kind of shed light on who we are and what we bring to the table. What is our culture, and that it is so much bigger than just some simplified of how one person might see one part of me or you, as it may be. So that's the work that we're engaging in, and we just wanted, as we started, right, and Dr. Pilch and I were saying, all right, this is kind of how we started with this, that tonight we're giving you an update on culture and climate, and we could do it just like every other, right? And it's all important work, but how incredibly important is it that we really are thinking about cultivating a safe, healthy, and inclusive learning environment for every student, embracing our diversity, embracing who we are, and engaging all of our stakeholders. And that's what we want to bring to all of you tonight. So I'm really excited to be able to go a little deeper on what's been that work. And what are some of our outcomes as we've done this through our I-2020 and now and really reach some very important milestones. And then what are we working on now as we just continue this work? So thank you for sharing yourselves a little bit, and thank you again to Amy and Jesus and Jesse for sharing a little bit about yourselves and just sharing a little bit of your expertise with us tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Can we make comments or questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, do you have, okay, yes.
I do.
I don't need to start, but of course I will. I just want to say that, well, thank you. And I'm grateful that we had the opportunity to see what you're doing with educators. It's important for us to know that. And then from another perspective, for those of you, and I'm sure many of you do know that, I mean, I have been an educator in District 6 for a long time. Mm-hmm. And starting with having diversity cohort groups back in the 90s and MTSS work and all those things that have been part of my journey in the education, what I want to say is that the fact that we have a strategic plan in I-2020 and then I-2030 allows us to know that this will become systemic and that we're not going to lose this work. And the fact that we're all able to understand and get updates and know what's going on and having powerful educators present this across the district. So I appreciate that, I value that, and I just can't say enough how important it is that we have these systems in place so that we don't lose this. So thank you.
Thank you.
I just thought it was really powerful you saying that we sometimes cut off some of the things without even knowing it. You know, that's you know, it's probably really easy to do and probably happens more than we know because we don't know we even did it. So just to cut someone's nose off with and not mean to, that causes a lot of issues unbeknownst to both parties. You know, I mean, if I cut Brenda's nose off and I didn't mean to, then she's mad at me, and I didn't, or
She's not a doctor anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was the one of the things that just really stuck out to me is I need to be a little more conscientious of that, possibly just my entire life.
Yeah, I thought that was the most interesting part of the exercise too, is crossing off something
I
from
don't
somebody
like
else.
Neither did Taylor.
And something that it seemed to be true for everybody was, we would cross off the thing that wasn't as important to us. Kyle said Brenda's, her being a doctor wasn't as important to him in terms of putting her on the board. And I could say that about Ms. Pappas, but her being a lover of nature, however important that is to her, it doesn't necessarily benefit me in the same way that her commitment to service and community and education do. And I just thought it was interesting that the things that we cut out were the things that maybe didn't benefit or that we didn't value as much.
In the past, we had talked about doing a cultural proficiency training with the board. I didn't know if that was anything we still wanted to do.
I think this was a little bit of that. It's a taste of it. So that would be the pleasure of the board if that's something, if you guys would like to do more or go deeper. We have staff.
Are you a creator of this, or is, I don't know if this is like borrowed from another program or whatnot?
And over the years, especially with folks like Amy and then our district equity team and school equity teams, we just kind of gather and we have ideas and, they morph into something else. Essentially I saw something similar at a Colorado Department of Education around English language learners. But I thought, well, how cool would it be to really look at it in an intentional way around how we show up as folks, as people. And in practicing it with folks over the last 7-8 years, it's become one of the most popular activities that we do. It's really cool. You can do it with your classroom students, you can do it with families. We've done it with, Brian did it at a grassroots Greeley-Evans summit with a group of families, parents. It's really nice to see that perspective too.
Yeah, I guess I love that there's 5 circles. So you talked about how a lot of this cultural proficiency work came out of like medicine and bedside manner. And in the clinic where I work, we have a very diverse community with people from all over the world, same as District 6. But often it is easy to just come into the room and see a refugee patient and say, and that's it, right? That's all of your identity is you're a refugee, which I love, and I know there's a backstory, but there's so much more to people than just they're a refugee, right? Like, I remember one time I came in the room and my patient's like, oh, you want to see my daughter? And she's my refugee patient, and she pulls up her phone and opens up TikTok. And I'm like, you have TikTok? Like, she's this 40-year-old woman. I don't have TikTok. And it was just a fun video, and it just expanding who people are outside of just appearances. That is definitely I was like, oh, that's 3 of the 5 of me were related to my ethnicity and my upbringing and my background. But there is more to me than that. And I think just knowing that that's the same everywhere we go.
I talk to students all the time, and one of the questions I ask is, what makes a teacher cool? And oftentimes the response is they know me. And they let some stuff slide too.
And they skateboard.
Well, thank you guys. We appreciate you being here. It's a fun exercise, an important exercise.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving right along, I imagine we will have Mr. Fall come for this, and
Mr. Fall.
this is our legislative update, so we get to stop talking and learning about each other. and hear what our legislators are doing in Denver.
I'm sorry. I got it electronically. I'm good.
So, thank you, members of the board. Dr. Pilch. We are in our second kind of legislative update with you all. I think the format worked really well at the last meeting. And so the first page is just a number of bills to talk about that we didn't talk about at the last meeting. And then the second page of that document that you have is really just additional information about some of the bills that we had kind of discussed in length at the prior meeting. So again, I kind of want to make this more of an open discussion. If you have any questions or considerations about any of these bills, please let me know and we can kind of move forward. So we'll start with Senate Bill 23070, Mandatory School Resource Officer Training. This bill went through the Senate Education Committee. It's now going to be in front of the Senate Appropriations Committee on March 3rd, 2023. I just wanted to point out for you all that this bill was heavily amended. I'm not sure if you've been familiar with this bill or have seen it before. Previously, it required that all assigned peace officers who are school resource officers must take the POST training. That's the Colorado Peace Officers Standards and Training. The POST board develops training for school resource officers. Under Colorado law right now, SROs aren't required to take that POST training. They're encouraged to. I will say, and I just talked with our Chief of Safety and Security, John Gates, that we do have SROs in our school district, and they are all assigned through the Greeley Police Department. We have a really good relationship with the Greeley Police Department, and all their SROs do a really great job. Our SROs are already being trained in this way. They go through what is a 40-hour training requirement to get their school resource officer trainings. Any school resource officer in our building is required to take this training. And so I think in a lot of ways this bill is really for police departments and law enforcement agencies to require that all of their peace officers take this kind of school resource officer training if they're going to be in a student building. But again, I just wanted to point out for you all that this bill has been heavily amended, and really now all it does is it requires that there is a committee that is formed to convene a training for SROs to discuss best practices in responding to safe-to-tell reports, including defining roles, communications about a report, outcome reporting, and training resources to improve school resource officers, support of students, and the school staff. And that Safe-to-Tell may conduct a survey to collect data and discussions regarding Safe-to-Tell operations. So it's really just kind of dialing back those training requirements and really just kind of allowing school resource officers to engage in meaningful discussions around Safe-to-Tell and what they can do to kind of improve those communications. So this is just an opportunity just to see a bill that they struck all of the language in the bill as it was introduced, and then they just amended it to include this Safe-to-Tell language. So I just wanted to point out for you all that we, have this opportunity to kind of heavily amend legislation as it comes our way that might be problematic. And I did look, and a lot of the law enforcement agencies across the state are now in support of this bill. So do we have any questions about that? I don't know if anybody had seen this bill.
I have just a question about our SROs. Are they employees of the district, or are they employees of the Greeley Police Department?
So they're employees of the Greeley Police Department.
And the Evans Police Department.
And the Evans Police Department.
Okay.
Yeah, my apologies. The Evans Police Department, we also have a really good relationship with as well.
So yeah, like you said, this wouldn't, it wouldn't be our job or business to install this training. And maybe they're already doing it, but.
Right, and it would just, if there was an SRO in our building, we would just need to make sure that they have completed this training if this kind of previous version was enacted, but now, they're already doing it, so.
Okay.
Okay, moving on. House Bill 231198, Teacher Externship Program for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math Disciplines. This was introduced in the House. It'll go in front of the House Education Committee on March 8th. I have been reading and rereading this bill and trying to wrap my mind around kind of how this bill is intended to work. But essentially what it's doing is it's establishing an externship program for K-12 teachers to engage in experiential learning opportunities with employers, i.e. not district employers, but kind of like engineering groups or some other kind of, I can't think of another example, engineering company, for example, for teachers to engage in kind of these externships or experiential learning opportunities to gain knowledge and expand their curriculum in the areas of the STEM disciplines. So it's a little confusing about how this might work. I think it would be really an opportunity for teachers to take part in these externship opportunities over the summer to kind of gain additional knowledge regarding STEM, and that they can implement these STEM curriculum into their own curriculum. And this will really give students the opportunity to learn more about STEM and to maybe have some desires to seek internships on their own in these particular fields. Employers who participate in this may be eligible for a tax credit. It's not required for teachers to do this. They could receive some additional financial support if they want to do this over the summer. And they could also, I will just point out that if they do this, if this law were to pass, teachers who participate could apply for some professional development credit for renewals of their license, or perhaps are in some kind of graduate school level course, and they could earn graduate school credits in order to help them on their way with graduation. So this is really just kind of a focus towards the STEM disciplines. I don't think it's necessarily anything that is going to impact us very much. I don't see any way for teachers to take part in these externships kind of during their normal teaching duties. This would be something that they could do over the summer, but perhaps it could be just an opportunity for them to gain additional knowledge in the areas of STEM. I suggest we continue to monitor this bill. I'm not sure if there is really any backing. There's only one sponsor behind this bill, and so I'm just not really sure where this is going to go. And so we'll see after March 8th if there's going to be any progress on this bill. The next talking point I had to discuss is the School Finance Act. Of course, we haven't seen that legislation be introduced yet. However, I did talk about this with our lobbyist, and I just wanted to point out for you all, it sounds like a lot of school districts are really going to go back to the old talking points when it comes to the School Finance Act. And those are really that we buy down the budget stabilization factor and that we fully fund special education. It looks like we're kind of losing sight of equity in the School Finance Act formula. And I think that those two issues are kind of being conflated. They're really two separate and distinct issues that both need resolutions, right? We still need to address fully funding public education, and on the other hand, we do need to address equity in the formula. So I just wanted to point out for you all that I think it's really important that we continue to kind of keep in the back of our mind this issue of equity in the school finance formula. We know that there was changes to the at-risk measures. However, right now it's really challenging to determine those socioeconomic factors that they've introduced for the at-risk measures. I talked with Ms. Sponsler earlier. It doesn't sound like they're really going to be able to implement those new at-risk measures next year. I think from my notes, and I could be wrong, from what I understand, districts might need to look at every student's address right now. Right now we have, 23,000 students. That's a huge burden for us to really determine kind of those neighborhood socioeconomic factors. And so really to implement those new at-risk measures is going to be a real challenge. So, I think it was really important. It was a step in the right direction that we are amending the at-risk factor and how we're looking at it, other than just whether or not a student qualifies for free and reduced lunch. But on the other hand, there might be more changes that we need to be looking at in the future. And so just kind of keep that in the back of your mind as the School Finance Act comes out. Again, it looks like really we're going to be focused on the budget stabilization factor and fully funding special education, which I'm not saying aren't important. They're extremely important, but the equity is just as important for a school district like District 6, where we have so many students who do qualify for free and reduced lunch.
So in the future, are they thinking of somehow computerizing it to where you can input the kids' addresses and it, is it always going to be a manual input?
Who knows? That would be ideal, but who knows? And
Okay.
is there anything legislation around that? Not that I know of.
I don't think so. I think this is kind of, the Colorado Department of Education and school districts kind of working hand in hand on determining kind of how that is going to be determined, other than literally going in and entering every single student's address into a computerized system. I'm sure at some point they will have some kind of more general way of identifying this, and I don't know if Ms. Sponsor has anything to speak to that, but yeah, for right now, it just sounds like it's kind of going to be a little bit burdensome on school districts until they come out with a better way to determine that number.
But the big deal here is, you may recall that we have been advocating for students to count as at risk and to count in every area in which they qualify as at risk. So that would mean living in poverty. It might mean they are on an IEP. It might mean they are an English language learner. There could be other factors. There could be health factors, but the energy around trying to figure out how to change the formula around that risk seems to be diminishing with the thinking that, well, if we just take care of the budget stabilization factor and we take care of special education, isn't that enough? So, for districts like ours and the small rural districts, I think this is still a really important issue for us to think about and be mindful of, as is the rural funding, which I think Nate has on there also.
Right, and we do know that there was a need for equity in the formula as well for rural school districts because we rely so heavily on local taxpayer revenue to support public education, that they've done a lot of work to help support rural schools. That a lot of that did come from kind of the federal funding through ESSER, and we know that that money is going to be going away. And so we're still looking to find some ways to support our rural districts here in Weld County. We do have a need to continue to support the school districts around us. And so just kind of continuing to keep our foot on the gas in terms of finding an equitable way to support all students in the state is really important and something that we need to really be considering. So with that, we can turn to the second page. I know at the last meeting we talked about the Stop the Bleed school training kits, which was introduced by Representative Young. I know that Mr. Bentley had really asked about kind of, is this a big deal? We really just need some more information on this, and why are we kind of passing this legislation? I looked into it, so I provided a link for you all if you have any curiosity. The National Center for Disaster Medicine and Public Health published some statistics that trauma is the leading cause of death for people 1 to 40 years old, and that hemorrhaging is responsible for 35% of pre-hospital deaths, and 40% of deaths in the first 24 hours occur after a traumatic event. So I think a lot of the advocates for these Stop the Bleed training kits are speaking to this issue of trauma. I could not find any data or information regarding schools specifically, and whether or not this would really be important or helpful, but that's just kind of where this information is coming from and why this legislation is being proposed. So that's just a little bit of background information in case you were kind of curious.
We don't know if it's because of some specific event that, I don't know. Because it seems like usually we can point to like, oh, this happened and this is why this is better.
And my guess is, just big accidents happening around the United States for kind of these shootings and things of that nature are probably why they're looking to kind of these other opportunities to help support trauma-induced injuries. I don't think there's been anything specific in Colorado in a number of years, but that'd be my guess.
Do our staff get like BLS trained, like basic life support? Like
CPR.
Yeah, CPR.
Well, every staff has a crisis team, and that crisis team has basic, not necessarily CPR training, basic first aid training. And then every staff has some folks who are CPR trained. Particularly our larger buildings, our secondary buildings, coaches have to all be CPR trained. We have the AEDs in all of our buildings, and we have staff in every building who are trained to use those AEDs. But they've not had this specific Stop the Bleed training.
I guess it'd be an interesting comparison because, right, cardiac arrest, I guess staff members, like the older folks in the building are more likely to have cardiac arrest, teachers and not necessarily students. I'm just wondering, school shootings versus a student cardiac arrest, what's more likely if we're training staff to use AEDs I mean, maybe it's not all, obviously not all for students, but like if, I don't know, it would seem.
Yeah, I only had a brief conversation with Representative Young about this. She's just very interested in having this training be expanded in the state of Colorado. I don't think there's any one specific thing. When I heard her speak about it, she thinks it's a pretty simple training, and why wouldn't we do it? And so, since why wouldn't we? Let's put it in legislation. Yeah.
Maybe the shop teachers.
Yeah, or maybe.
With power tools. I don't know.
Yeah, we are getting a little more vocationally oriented, so
Yeah.
we do need this.
Yeah, and again, as a lawyer, I still didn't see an immunity provision included in this bill. It has been introduced. At the last time, it was just a draft, and now it's been introduced. And I would like to see an immunity provision if there was some accident and somebody did not prevent traumatic injury leading to death, even though they had a stop the bleed kit and didn't use it correctly, things of that nature.
Does it need one with the
Good Samaritan.
Good Samaritan
Like
law?
governmental immunity.
So I want to be protected on all angles. So,
Such a lawyer.
Bells and suspenders.
but we do have the
appreciate that,
Colorado
Mr. Fall.
we do have the Colorado Governmental Immunity Act and the Good Samaritan laws, and so those would likely apply. But an argument could be made.
I think the correct answer is it depends.
That is the correct answer. Thank you. So the next bill, Senate Bill 23071, this is that Education Accountability Act. I just wanted to make clear with you all that we are going to move to a position of support from Monitor. I think our discussion last board meeting was really thoughtful, and there is good reason to kind of maintain local control in these issues, even if it might not be a battle that we're willing to fight. It's always good to kind of put this back in the hands of school districts to make that decision on whether or not that's something that they want to pursue. So I just wanted to kind of clear that up with you all, and I think that's the direction that we were intending to go. In this last bill, Senate Bill 23061, this is that eliminate state assessments in social studies. This did get through the Senate second reading on February 27th, it had the second reading today on February 27th, 2023, and I apologize, I didn't check to see how that went. My guess is it likely passed. I just wanted to point out under bullet point C, this bill was amended to clarify social studies standards and values of teaching social studies is still included. And so in the bill now with this amendment that was introduced during the Senate Education Committee is this kind of quote that I have here is the General Assembly declares that eliminating the requirement that the Colorado Department of Education administer a state assessment in social studies neither eliminates education standards for instructional areas related to social studies nor eliminates the value or significance of social studies. So it's just, really emphasizing the importance of teaching social studies, but getting rid of the state assessment. I think in a lot of ways, a lot of what we talked about at the last board meeting is that this is going to really reduce administrative costs on the side of not only the state, but on the side of school districts, and it reduces workload for these state assessments. Right now, the fiscal note says that it's going to reduce state appropriations by over $1 million. So we really think there's a lot of benefit to supporting this bill.
That's what I needed. I'm glad that's in there.
Amendment.
I don't know if anybody had any other bills for discussion or anything else that has come up recently that you were wanting to kind of touch base about or get more information on.
Looks like we're good, Mr. Fall.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
for keeping us updated. We are now ready to debrief the work session, and so Dr. Campos-Spitzky, we'll start with you.
Sure. I really enjoyed hearing from Jesus Tijerina and I'm going to forget her name.
Amy.
Amy, yes, Zulaf, who is about to be principal at Greeley Central, is that right? Yeah, that was a great presentation, and thanks for helping us. There you are. To actually experience some cultural proficiency amongst the 7 of us. So that was great. Thanks, guys.
Mr. Bentley?
Yeah, same. That was fun and enlightening at the same time. Kind of brought a different perspective to my eyes. So excited for the negotiations this week. Last year, it was kind of a nerve-wracking unknown for me, just being my first negotiation. So to kind of have a little bit of experience in that process I think will serve me well this year. So good to kind of get in there with the GEA and get that knocked out and then move on to the rest of the calendar and everything. So thank you guys.
Ms. Mesh?
Yes, thank you very much for the cultural proficiency activity, and helped us to get to know each other a little bit better. And yeah, just a powerful, anytime you can do something hands-on is more helpful to get that information there. So, and thank you for the the legislative update as well. And yeah, that's all.
Ms. Sullivan?
Jesse and Amy, thank you for that. I guess coming as a teacher, I don't want to say former because I am going to go back to it eventually, but just getting to see that aspect of not looking at it as a person and just taking that first impression of what you see, but getting to know them a little bit more and understanding the values of what they bring to the table, and always to not forget to, or to never, I guess, cross off one of their components that makes them who they are. So I actually really enjoyed this, but it was a little bit hard to do that because you have your own insecurities, and it brings out the fear factor, I guess, of judgments and whatnot of how people see you. So I did enjoy that. I do want to still, Mr. Fall, request that you can continue with this format because it does help us to understand those bills a little bit more, to go into them a little bit more deeper, and it gets me to actually go do the more research on them because it's not so overwhelming when we see 30 of them on the list. So please keep doing it that way, my request.
Ms. Peps?
I too appreciate Mr. Fall and Jesse and Amy. I think an important component of having this today is that it gives a clarification of what we're doing for cultural proficiency, as there are a lot of ideas and suppositions about what that looks like. So this gives us one indication of what cultural proficiency looks like in our district.
Yeah, just add my thanks to everybody who presented tonight. We do appreciate it. Very informative on both counts. And thank you, Dr. Pilch, for putting this together for us. Thank you, everybody, for your attention. And thanks for, we're 5:33, so we're about 3 minutes late. But we will adjourn, and we will see everybody back for the business meeting at 6 o'clock.